Let's get right into it. Grayson Allen, the story last night. He received the second technical foul of his collegiate career following his third tripping/kicking incident, I'll call it, in a year. First against Louisville, then Florida State, and last night versus Elon. He became overly emotional on the bench after finding out about the technical after the incident. He sat the final 4:15 of the first half and did not start the second half. Here's Grayson.
I made a really bad play. Sorry to him, Santa Ana. Sorry to the officials who have to call that. Sorry to my team because it's selfish and taken away from them. I'm not proud of it at all. Afterwards, I just wanted to make sure I apologize to him. I mean, I don't plan on doing it again, but I made another mistake and to try to be better again, just like I tried to be better for past years.
So in the aftermath, Coach K released the following statement this morning. We've had the opportunity to thoroughly review the incident involving Grayson Allen from last night's game against Elon. As I stated last night, the incident was unacceptable and inexcusable. He took an important step last night by apologizing in person to Santa Ana and Coach Matt Matheny. As a program, we need to take further steps regarding his actions that do not meet the standards of Duke basketball. To that end, we have determined that Grayson will be suspended from competition for an indefinite amount of time. Stephen A., how long should this suspension be?
Well, I agree with my man Jay Williams. For our college basketball coverage, he does an outstanding job for us. By the way, was a bad boy, Wooden Award winner, player of the year, big time player, Jay Williams.
Yep.
I totally agree with him. Minimum 5 games. You have to do this. I'm not going to sit up here and excoriate a kid. He's a kid. He's a young man. At the same time, we wouldn't make excuses for anybody else. Let's not try here. This kid seems out of control. It wasn't just the incident itself. When he went to the bench, he seems like there's something missing. There's something wrong. And I'm the kind of person that you look at things from afar, you see what you see, you call it like you see it. But at the same time, when you communicate with people or those close to them and you get some insight, Max, into who they are and how they think and what they endure, you try to harbor an elevated level of sensitivity. I've spoken to J.J. Redick of the Clippers about this kid because J.J. Redick came to his defense a few months ago when he made this mistake last year. And I respect the hell out of J.J. Redick. He's a fantastic player, was feisty, had an attitude. Duke walks into a stadium when he started at Duke. People throwing stuff at you, people saying all types of stuff from you. It gets your competitive juices and adrenaline flowing. We get all of that. But J.J. Redick, a Christian Laettner in the past for Duke, their heads seemed on straight. They just didn't mind being bad boys from time to time. That's competitive. It's not out of control. Grayson Allen seems to be out of control. And that's what I find problematic in this entire equation. I'm not saying that you just suspend him for 5 games because of what he did. I'm saying you suspend him the minimum of 5 games, which, by the way, Max, is against Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Boston College, Florida State, and Louisville. You suspend him because you have to get to the bottom of what on earth is going on with this kid. He does not seem stable looking at him last night.
I think the reason you have to suspend him for 5 games, and I agree with my man Jay Will, I mean, he's right about this.
Right.
Is because he touched the stove and he didn't get burnt yet. He needs to feel it burn for his own good, let alone to set a standard of acceptable behavior. We talked about Boogie Cousins yesterday a bunch, and Richard Sherman, who both, I felt, gave into moments of emotional weakness. Everyone's faced with this throughout their lives, but especially in the crucible of competition with the cameras on you and everything, their temptation is to give in and be weak in that moment, especially a very competitive person who's beaten on the play. I mean, this keeps happening to him when he has no other way of affecting the play. He sticks out his foot, which is dirty, but it's like the competitiveness gets the better of him in such a way that he fails that emotional test. And he knows he was on the hook for this anyway. Like, he knows people are watching for that. So for him to do it tells me that it's an impulse control problem. And then it's a matter of how do you rein that in? And he won't be able to rein it in if he just gets away with it. He needs to be suspended. So Richard Sherman, if you look at the way he dealt, now he did get caught, but if you look at the way he dealt with intimidating someone in the press, it seems to me that he's internalized throughout his life, because he's an evolved and educated person, the right way to do things. And when it was brought to his attention, maybe whether or not he wanted it to, look, you got caught doing this, he said, okay, you know what? That's not who I want to be. That's wrong. And the way he went about explaining himself, you think he's going to be okay. Richard Sherman's okay as character. Boogie Cousins was a little bit different. Boogie Cousins, you feel like, is he saying that because he feels like he has to? And will he ever get his impulses under control? And Grayson Allen here, who's their best player, he can ball, but you get the same feeling more along the lines of Boogie Cousins, where you feel, at least I feel, as though he keeps failing this emotional test. He gives in to he can't even call it the easy way out because of the repercussions, but he gives into that weakness and is willing to impulsively do something outside the rules when he can't win within the rules. So for everyone involved, including for him, he's got to feel it burn right now. If you touch the stove, you got to have a third-degree burn right now.
A couple of things is very, very important that we need to address. Number one, you've got people that sit there and they look at the Golden State Warriors, for example, and think about how if Draymond Green had not been suspended for Game 5 due to the kick in Game 4, they would be back-to-back champions. So I've got folks hollering at me talking about if Draymond Green's going to get character assassinated, if he's going to get raked through the coals, Grayson Allen needs to have the same. Not necessarily so. Draymond Green is being paid handsomely as a professional who went to college, played collegiate basketball for Tom Izzo. So you've went through that period. Grayson Allen is still a relatively young man on the collegiate level. Getting to your point in terms of impulse, reacting off of impulse and what have you. Max, to me, it's not about that. As much as I did not like that, and as much as I believe he should be suspended because of that, the reason why I'm just a touch empathetic to some degree is when I watched him go on the bench, he seemed completely out of control. That's not impulse at that particular moment in time. I'm just talking about it's a different impulse. I know it's all impulsive.
Yep, you're right. You're right. It's an emotional breakdown.
It's like an emotional breakdown. And I'm saying because of that, you have to get to the bottom of it, because to me, if this were anyone else, we would literally look at them and we would say they look unstable.
Yep.
I'm not saying that he's a kid. In no way am I trying to insult him. I'm saying to his wonderful parents, whom I'm assuming he has, to the great coach Mike Kay, to Duke University, to his teammates, his friends, and everybody else. I'm saying he looks as if he has a problem.
I'm glad
that needs to be said.
I think it's fair to say that the meltdown was almost more concerning than the third trip.
Right.
Yeah, although it may have been that he realized that he lost the impulse. Like this is
I know that. I think that's what
he
it is.
realized that it was about to really hit the fan.
But you've seen that, and have you seen guys act that way even when they realize that stuff's about to hit the fan and they messed up?
Well, really emotional guys through in sports at times, in basketball even, yes. But I'm glad you brought up the fact that he's a kid, because I also have reservations about being overly critical of college players. They're not professionals. They're not quite adults yet. And when you see them weeping in the locker room, or weepy in the locker room, realizing the magnitude of what they've done, or in this case, what Grayson Allen's done, I do feel more sympathetic and protective of that than if he makes the NBA and has a career and does this as a professional. At that point, my attitude in terms of how much sympathy I have for him in that moment likely changes.
Real quick before we move on, a couple updates from the ACC. A source at the ACC saying the league agrees with the decision of Duke and Coach K, and one ACC head coach said that Allen needs help to handle his actions, and a Duke source reiterating Thursday morning that the school needed time to review and have the appropriate conversations before determining a course of action. So we've reacted to what Coach K said this morning in a statement. Let's take a listen to what he said about it right after the game, though.
What he did tonight was right. That's what people do. They say they're sorry. They accept responsibility. And they want to make sure that the other party knows that. Look, a lot of crap has happened to him. And a lot of bad shots at him. That doesn't mean it's right for you to try to get back, or, just don't pay attention to it. You can't pay attention to the fact that you did something wrong and you let your team down. To think that it's the last thing that's said about this to him is wrong. Obviously, we will do more. It doesn't mean you have to see it.
Max, obviously this isn't a professional, still a college kid. So how does Coach K look after all of this?
Like the benevolent dictator, which is okay. He's earned that credibility. Look, he's the most successful coach in the modern era in college basketball. He's the most, since John Wooden, really. Maybe Dean Smith, you want to throw him in there, but certainly Dean Smith was revered in that way. But he has an enormous amount of credibility, and that's the way he comes off, like the benevolent dictator. That said, were I Coach K, I would suspend Grayson Allen from all team activities for a period of time. I mean, it needs to, the main thing is if they're serious about not only setting an example at the school for other student athletes, but also if they're concerned with Grayson Allen and his behavior, it has got to burn. The consequence has to be immediate, and it needs to be severe enough that it hurts. So the next time he has the impulse to touch the stove, he doesn't because he remembers, because he has a scar.
It's interesting that you say that because I'm thinking about Coach K, and what I'm thinking about is the Coach K that took the liberty of lecturing Dillon Brooks last year when they went against Oregon in the NCAA tournament. Dillon Brooks was getting the better of Grayson Allen to some degree, agitating him to some degree, and, basically didn't want to shake hands or whatever after the game, and Coach K reprimanded him. I have no problem with Coach K's decision that he reached this morning, suspending Grayson Allen indefinitely. I get and I acknowledge the fact that he said last night that his actions were unacceptable. But the Coach K that seemed so willing to come to the defense of his own player was the same Coach K that was willing to lecture Dillon Brooks last year, to the point where the Oregon coach stepped up and basically sat up there and said, "You coach your players, I'll coach mine."
He was right.
And he was right to say that. And then Coach K just wanted to, downplay all of that and step aside from it. Having said everything, what I come to, the thought that enters my mind is this, and I have no issue with Coach K. 1,055 career victories overall, 982 at Duke, winning 79% of his games. The man is elite. He's great. He's a Hall of Famer. We know this. The issue that I have is that if this were Coach John Calipari instead of Coach K, would we be talking about Grayson Allen?
No.
Or would we be talking about Coach Cal?
Cal.
So if we're talking about Coach Cal, why can't we talk about Coach K? Because I hear everybody on the news all over the place talking about Grayson Allen. He's a kid. Now, there are guys in the NBA, but that don't mean they're men. They're still kids, young men trying to become men, needing to evolve. At least this dude's in college in a structured environment, recognizing that you may not be ready for the real world just yet. But Coach K, the grown man, the winner within, even though he's not the one that wrote that book, the guy that has accomplished so much, my issue with him is that his actions about Grayson Allen are not consistent with what his actions were about Dillon Brooks. And so you can ask the question, Max, why that is. But last point is, again, if this were John Calipari, we'd be all over him. You're the problem. And your players are just indicative or they're emblematic of a bigger and realer problem, which is you, John Calipari. But far be it for any of us to say that about Coach K. No, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We're going to let Coach K off the hook. If something goes down with John Calipari like this, I don't want to hear a word.
I want to talk more about that point. I think it's a good one. First of all, Dillon Brooks is not on his team.
I know.
So when we look at college coaches and it's wrapped up in this idea that somehow it's for the good of the student athlete generally. No, it's not. They're looking out for their guys. And when he lectures another guy and the other coach tells him, worry about your own players, that's right. Worry about your own players. So let's look at how Coach K worries about his own players. Here's what's damning about this as it relates to Coach K, who, if he feels like he knows best, and he knows better than everyone else about how to handle this, his track record, at least in terms of winning, suggests that he's right. But in terms of the character of young men, this is recidivist behavior. So if this is your best player,
Did you say recidivist?
Yes, that means
I don't have my dictionary on me.
You do it again.
You do it
It's a
again.
pattern.
Yes.
Recidivist.
Like, someone goes to jail, they get out, they go back in.
I suspected that's what it meant, but I wanted to make sure.
My vocabulary is getting so much better since you're on
I
the
just
show,
wanted to
and I
make sure.
appreciate it.
I just wanted to make sure. I'm elevating my vocabulary.
I love it.
Stephen A. doesn't have a small vocabulary. He just plays that guy on TV sometimes with me.
Listen, he's helping the civilians like me over here.
I just need to know.
But the point is that kind of recidivist behavior you have to question. If that's your best player, Coach K, and ostensibly your leader, supposedly, your leader.
I knew that one. I knew that one. I learned that one last month. I learned that one last month, but go ahead.
And if he's your leader, and he's done this twice in the past, and this is an issue, why did it come up again? In other words, that is damning of Coach K. Your best player and supposedly your leader has done this twice in the past, and it happened again. You're absolutely right. If it was Calipari, that the story would be Coach Cal, but the story somehow here is not as much Coach K.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second and take the coaches out of this. I get that he's a college kid, but he is 21 years old. So at some point, don't you think he needs to be responsible and police himself and know better?
He's responsible now.
Yes, but that's why I brought up what you saw on the bench. Because when you see what I saw on the bench, that's not immaturity. That's something else. He seemed out of control. And when it comes to you being out of control,
that was a meltdown.
When it comes to a meltdown, your age doesn't matter. Because now it's about there's a problem.
Yep.
And it looks like there's a problem. The reason why Coach K is a different subject, Max, is because of this. Look, Coach K is the coach of Team USA basketball 3 times over. It's going to be Greg Popovich now. He did it in 2008, 2012, 2016. I've been on the record as much as I love me some Coach K. I always felt it gave him an unfair advantage over other college coaches. Coach K is the closest thing to untouchable in college basketball, and I'm saying,
you touching him?
He needs to be touched on this one, and it's rare because Coach K is close to perfection. But if you're not gonna get on a Coach Cal and others, you listen. You can't give him a pass because of what Max said. This is the 3rd time, so why wasn't this addressed before?
Your best player and leader, and that's a reflection on the coach. I think in some way it has to be, just as the success is a reflection on the coach. I want to bring up one name quickly. Ron Artest, Meta World Peace, right? Okay, so a good dude. Anyone who knows will tell you, it's a really good dude. And he had an impulse control issue for a lot of his career and could melt down. And he has taken steps to address that and has worked on himself and has talked about mental health, etc., and has transformed himself. I'm sure he still struggles with it, from someone who that was a major issue to someone who is really a role model in many respects now. And so that can be done. Behavior can be changed, if only on the margins, if people work on themselves. But if they're never forced to do it, really, if it's just lip service is paid toward it, they won't do it. It's really important that this is addressed.
But getting back to Coach K, because he's Coach K, there are times where he himself, and I mean no disrespect, because God knows I respect him, but there are times where he comes across as a bit above.
No, I know what you mean. Holier than thou,
And it's like, and I've seen him that way in protecting his own players, but I've also seen him that way against former players of his own.
Elliot Ness.
Who dare I say, have have given opinions about his program that have been somewhat critical. It will be real interesting to see how he treats Jay Williams going forward, considering that our very own Jay Williams called for Grayson Allen to be suspended for 5 games, and Jay Williams is one of, if not, is one of the greatest players in the history of Duke's program. This dude was electric.
Yeah, national champion.
And I see love coming to the Bobby Hurleys of the world and others like that. I don't see nearly as much love. Even to Jay Billis, I don't see nearly as much love being accorded to my man Jay Williams. I could be wrong. I'm just talking about what I see through my eyes during the time. I don't see
While we're talking about good dudes, another good dude.
Yep. And speaking of, so Grayson Allen suspended indefinitely. It'll also be interesting to see what that means in terms of games he will actually miss, which will continue.
And Molly, I don't know if you know, I'm sorry to regurgitate, Jay Williams was a bad boy.
I do.
I mean, this brother was off the chain.
It is known.
Jay Williams.